My grandmother left me a dilapidated house in a village as my inheritance, while my brother got a three-bedroom apartment in the capital. My husband called me a failure and kicked me out. I went to the village, and when I stepped inside the house, I was stunned. But before we continue, please write in the comments which country you're watching this video from. Enjoy. The air was thick with tension, so palpable you could touch it. Olga felt it growing with every heartbeat, tightening her chest. The notary's office was stuffy, smelling of old paper and something musty, as if only shadows of the past lingered here. The lawyer, a gaunt man in a formal suit, cleared his throat, adjusted his glasses, and began reading the will of Maria Stepanovna, their grandmother. Anton, Olga's older brother, sat beside her, lounging in his chair with a smug smile. He had always been their grandmother's favorite, a successful businessman living in the capital. Olga, on the other hand, seemed like a shadow in his presence, quiet, modest, working as a librarian. She always felt undervalued, as if her existence was merely a backdrop to her brother's vibrant life. The apartment at the address I bequeath to my grandson Anton Sergeyevich. The lawyer's voice was monotonous, like he was reading a verdict. Anton raised an eyebrow triumphantly, casting a fleeting, almost contemptuous glance at Olga. She tried to stay calm, though inside she was seething. She knew her grandmother loved Anton, but she still hoped for some semblance of fairness. And the house located in the village of Zarecha, along with all its outbuildings and land, I bequeath to my granddaughter, Olga Sergeyevna. Olga felt the blood drain from her face. Zarecha, an old, crumbling house she barely remembered. She had only been there as a young child. It must be a mistake, a misunderstanding. What was she supposed to do with a falling-apart house? Anton burst out laughing. Well, Olga, at least you got something. You shouldn't have expected anything worthwhile from Grandma. What are you going to do with that junk? Chop firewood. Olga stayed silent, unable to find words. Resentment choked her like a snake. She felt humiliated and insulted. Why had her grandmother done this? Did she really think Olga was so worthless that all she deserved was an old house in a remote village? After the will was read, everything happened quickly. Anton, pleased with himself, hurried off, tossing over his shoulder, "Don't forget to sell that wreck, or the taxes will eat you alive." The lawyer handed Olga the documents and keys to the house. She left the office in a daze. Outside, her husband, Igor, was waiting. He looked grim and irritated. "So, what happened?" he asked, not even bothering to greet her. Olga told him about the will. Igor listened, his frown deepening. When she finished, he exploded. "A house in the village? Are you serious? Olga, can you do anything useful for once? You're always causing problems. A capital apartment, that's a real opportunity. And you? You got some trash. You're just unlucky, a total failure." Igor's words cut deeper than Anton's mockery. She had always tried to be a good wife, supporting him in everything, but he never appreciated her, always criticizing her for being weak and not earning enough. "Igor, please," she tried to defend herself, but he cut her off. "Enough. I'm tired of you and your uselessness. Pack your things and get out. I'm done carrying you." Olga felt her world collapse. She was alone, no money, no support, just the keys to an old house in a remote village. Tears welled up, but she held them back. She wouldn't let him see her weakness. Packing her belongings, Olga left the apartment she and Igor had rented together. She didn't know where to go or what to do. One thought consumed her: get as far away as possible from this deceit, this betrayal. Without much thought, she bought a bus ticket to Zarechiye. She didn't care what awaited her in that god-forsaken village. She just needed to escape, to hide, to start over. The journey was long and exhausting. The bus rattled over potholes. Gray landscapes flashed by outside. Olga stared out the window, trying to distract herself from dark thoughts. She remembered her grandmother, her kind eyes, her soft voice. Maybe there was something in that old house that would help her understand herself, find her path in life. When the bus reached Zarachi, dusk was falling. The village greeted her with silence and desolation. The houses were crooked, their paint peeling. Time seemed to have stopped here. Olga stepped off the bus and looked around. In the distance, she saw the old house, surrounded by an overgrown garden. It looked grim and unwelcoming. Golga, Ray, weathered, abandoned by all. Dragging her suitcase, Olga trudged toward the house. Her heart pounded anxiously. She felt uncertain and alone. What awaited her in this old house? Could she find any meaning in life here? She slowly circled the house. From the outside, it looked like a sad ghost of the past, neglected and forgotten. Peeling paint, sagging shutters, an overgrown yard, everything screamed of decay. She expected the inside to be just as dismal, but to her surprise, the house was clean and tidy, as if someone had been maintaining it despite its apparent abandonment. There was no sense of neglect. Rather, it felt like the house was simply waiting for its moment. The rooms smelled of dust and old wood, but not dampness. The furniture, though old, was sturdy and well kept. Yellowed photographs hung on the walls, framing faces of people Olga had never seen. She felt the history of this family, her family, watching her from the depths of the... As she explored the rooms, Olga noticed a small storage closet in the far corner of the house. The door was tightly shut, blending almost seamlessly with the wall. She tried to open it, but it wouldn't budge. It took effort to shift the rusted lock. The creak of old hinges echoed through the house, making Olga flinch. Behind the door wasn't just a closet. It was a room filled with books. Shelves stretched from floor to ceiling, packed with volumes of all sizes and colors. Some were bound in leather with gold embossing, others in simple paper covers. The room was so cleverly hidden, it could easily be mistaken for an ordinary pantry. There were no windows, but small vents ensured airflow, preventing moisture buildup. Olga froze at the threshold, stunned by the sight. She had no idea her grandmother had a library, let alone one this vast. She had always pictured her grandmother as a simple village woman, busy with household chores, but this library spoke of something else: intelligence, education, and a passion for knowledge. She stepped inside and ran her hand along the spines. Her fingers felt the roughness of old leather and the smoothness of paper. The scent of ancient books was intoxicating, transporting Olga to another world, a world of knowledge and discovery. Though never an avid reader, in this room, she felt an overwhelming urge to uncover what lay behind these covers. Some books were in Russian, others in foreign languages. Olga recognized French and German from her school days and was surprised to find several volumes in Latin and ancient Greek. She picked up a leather-bound book and opened it. The pages were yellowed with age, but the text was clear and legible. It was a historical book, printed in the 15th century. Olga spent hours in the library, examining the books and wondering how her grandmother had amassed such a collection. She sensed that this library wasn't just a collection of books. It was part of her heritage, a key to understanding her family and herself. It was a secret her grandmother had left, just for her. Eager to learn more about the library, Olga continued exploring the house. The basement was large and dry, surprising for such an old structure. She descended the creaky stairs and looked around. In a corner, she spotted something covered with an old tarp. Curious, she approached and pulled the fabric aside. Beneath it was an old metal safe. The safe was massive and imposing, with a combination lock. Olga tried to open it but failed. She had no idea what the code might be or what could be inside. The safe felt like another mystery she needed to solve. Then a thought struck her. Her grandmother always remembered the birthdays of all her grandchildren and great-grandchildren. It was her little quirk. Olga decided to try her own birth date. She entered the numbers and heard a click. The safe opened. Inside were old letters, photographs, documents, and notebooks, all neatly arranged and tied with a ribbon. Olga's heart raced. She knew she had found something significant, something that could change her life. She started with the letters. From her grandmother's words, Olga learned about her true role in the family as the spiritual heir. Her grandmother explained why Anton received the apartment. He was distant from the family and didn't value it. The documents confirmed that some of the books held cultural and monetary value. Among the archives were photos of young Olga with her grandmother, moments of closeness, trust, and love. For the first time in a long while, Olga's tears weren't from resentment, but from realization. With trembling hands, Olga unfolded the first sheet of yellowed paper. The smell of age, of her grandmother, hit her, stirring an ache in her chest. The handwriting was familiar, neat, with a slight rightward slant. She remembered it from childhood, when her grandmother taught her to write letters in a thick, lined notebook. Hello, my dear Olenka, my beloved granddaughter. If you're reading this letter, I'm already far away, in a better world. And you're probably wondering why things turned out the way they did. Why did Anton get the big apartment, and you got the old house in a remote village? Olga froze, as if struck by lightning. Her grandmother seemed to read her thoughts, knowing her hurt and disappointment. Tears welled up, but she held them back, eagerly absorbing every word. Believe me, the decision wasn't easy. I thought long and hard about how to be fair, how to secure a future for both of you. But over time, I realized that fairness is relative, and true inheritance isn't money or property. It's memory, history, and a connection to your roots. Her grandmother wrote that Anton had always been detached from family values. He cared only for material wealth, career, and success in the big city. The apartment in the capital, Maria Stepanovna believed, would give him the start he needed to achieve his goals. She foresaw that he'd likely sell it, but that was his choice, his path. But you, Olenka, her grandmother continued, you're different. You've always been closer to the earth, to nature, to history. You felt a connection to the past, to our ancestors. Do you remember how we read old books together, how I told you stories about our family, about those who lived here before us? I saw in you that spark, that love for what's ours, capable of preserving and enriching our legacy. Olga swallowed the lump in her throat. She did remember those evenings when her grandmother, sitting in a rocking chair by the fireplace, read her fairy tales and stories from ancient books. She recalled the smell of old paper, the soft rustle of pages, the warmth of her grandmother's hands. In those moments, she felt safe. Her grandmother went on, explaining that the house in Zareche wasn't just an old building in need of repair. It was a symbol of their family, their history, their roots. Her ancestors had lived within its walls. Here, they were born and died, loved and suffered. The house held their memory, their spirit, their energy. The library you found is my pride and my pain, Maria Stepanovna wrote. I collected these books my entire life, preserving them carefully, dreaming they'd end up with someone who could appreciate their true value. I know you can do that, Olenka. You'll feel their soul, you'll understand their meaning. In the next letter, her grandmother detailed where to find documents proving the book's value, old catalogs, expert appraisals, letters from renowned bibliophiles and historians. She also warned of potential challenges in appraising and selling the books, advising Olga to seek professional help. Olga turned to the documents. Among the yellowed pages, she found ancient bills of sale, deeds, and wills. One mentioned that some books had belonged to a prominent noble family that owned these lands before the Revolution. Another document revealed that several books had been gifted to the library by Emperor Alexander II himself. Gradually, Olga grasped the magnitude of her inheritance. This wasn't just a collection of old books, it was a true treasure trove of immense cultural and historical value, and it was now hers. But the photographs touched her most deeply. In an old album, she found countless images of herself as a young girl with her grandmother, Maria Stepanovna. There they were, walking through the forest, picking mushrooms and berries. There, sitting by the river, fishing. There, baking pies in the kitchen, laughing and talking. In one photo, Olga saw herself at about 5 years old, sitting on her grandmother's lap, listening intently as she read a fairy tale. Her face showed wonder and amazement. Her eyes filled with boundless love and trust, while her grandmother's face radiated tenderness and care. At that moment, Olga broke down. She couldn't hold back the tears any longer. They streamed down her cheeks, hot and plentiful, washing away the resentment, disappointment, and insecurity from her soul. These weren't tears of despair, but of realization, realizing she wasn't alone, that she had roots, a family, a grandmother who loved her and believed in her. She understood that her grandmother hadn't just left her a house and a library, she had left her love, wisdom, and faith. She had given her the key to her own heart, her own soul. Olga wiped her tears and looked at the photos again. Now, she saw not just images, but a reflection of her own story, her own destiny. She knew her place was here, in this old house, in this quiet village. Here, she would find herself. Here, she would find meaning in life. Here, she would be happy. But the photographs touched her most deeply. In an old album, she found countless images of herself as a young girl with her grandmother, Maria Stepanovna. There they were, walking through the forest, picking mushrooms and berries. There, sitting by the river, fishing. There, baking pies in the kitchen, laughing and talking. In one photo, Olga saw herself at about 5 years old, sitting on her grandmother's lap, listening intently as she read a fairy tale. Her face showed wonder and amazement, her eyes filled with boundless love and trust, while her grandmother's face radiated tenderness and care. At that moment, Olga broke down. She couldn't hold back the tears any longer. They streamed down her cheeks, hot and plentiful, washing away the resentment, disappointment, and insecurity from her soul. These weren't tears of despair, but of realization, realizing she wasn't alone, that she had roots, a family, a grandmother who loved her and believed in her. She understood that her grandmother hadn't just left her a house and a library. She had left her love, wisdom, and faith. She had given her the key to her own heart, her own soul. Olga wiped her tears and looked at the photos again. Now, she saw not just images, but a reflection of her own story, her own destiny. She knew her place was here, in this old house, in this quiet village. Here, she would find herself. Here, she would find meaning in life. Here, she would be happy. Olga made a firm decision. She wouldn't sell the house. The thought took root in her soul, strong and unwavering, pushing out doubt and fear. She would stay in Zarekia, breathe life into the old walls, restore the house to its former glory, not for money, not for revenge against her brother, but for herself, for the little girl in those yellowed photos who clung trustingly to her beloved grandmother. Her first step was finding a restorer. The locals, initially wary of her, began to warm up, seeing her genuine desire to revive the abandoned house. An elderly woman named Agafya, whose house was closest to Olga's, recommended a craftsman from a neighboring village, Ivan. "He's got golden hands," she praised, "and he treats old things with soul." Ivan was a man of few words, but knew his craft. After inspecting the house, he shook his head. "There's a lot of work, but the house is solid. It'll stand for years." Olga sighed with relief. They agreed on a price and timeline, and even promised to start in a week. Next, Olga tackled the library's appraisal. Knowing she couldn't assess the book's value herself, she decided to contact experts. Online, she found several antique bookstores in Moscow and sent them photos of the most intriguing volumes. A response came surprisingly quickly. One shop expressed interest and offered to send an expert to evaluate the collection in person. The expert arrived 2 days later. A young man in glasses, who introduced himself as Kirill, carefully examined the library, flipping through books and jotting notes in a notebook. Olga watched him, her heart pounding. Finally, Kirill looked up and smiled. "You have a real treasure here," he said. "Some of these books are unique." Olga barely suppressed a gasp. "For example, this one," Kirill said, pointing to an old leather-bound book with a crest. "In this condition, it's extremely rare." "How much could it be worth?" Olga dared to ask. Kirill paused. It's hard to say exactly, but I'd estimate no less than a 3-bedroom apartment in the capital, he replied, looking her in the eye. Olga's heart raced. 1 book. How many more were in the library? The realization of her inheritance's value filled her with awe and excitement. Kirill offered to help with the appraisal and sale of the books, explaining about auctions and private collectors willing to pay top dollar for rare editions. Olga thanked him, but asked for time to think. She hadn't decided what to do with the library, sell it all at once, sell it gradually, or perhaps turn the house into a museum. That same day, Olga decided to contact Uncle Petya, the son of her grandmother's friend, mentioned in one of the letters. She found his number in an old address book from the safe. Uncle Petya was delighted to hear from her. He remembered Olga as a little girl and recalled her grandmother, Maria Stepanovna. I always knew there was something special about that house, he said. Your grandmother was a wise woman. She always said, the greatest wealth isn't money, it's memory. Olga told Uncle Petya about the library, the letters, and her plans to restore the house. He listened attentively and offered his help. I may live far away, but I'm always ready to give advice, he said. I have connections. I can introduce you to the right people, help you navigate the paperwork. Olga was grateful for Uncle Petya's support. She felt she wasn't alone in this, that she had an ally who shared her love for family history. That evening, her phone rang. It was Anton. Hey, Olga, she heard his voice. How's it going out there in the sticks? Everything's fine, Anton, Olga replied calmly. How's your apartment? It's fine, Anton said evasively. Listen, I was thinking, maybe we got upset over the inheritance for no reason. What if we swapped? You give me the house, and I'll give you the apartment. Olga smirked. You know, Anton, I've been thinking a lot too, she said. And I've decided I'm happy with what I have. I like the house. But there's nothing there, Anton protested. It's just a wreck. It has something far more valuable than any apartment, Olga replied. Memory, history, and I'm not trading that for anything. Silence hung on the line. Anton clearly hadn't expected that response. Well, suit yourself, he muttered finally. Don't come crying to me later when I warned you. I won't, Olga said firmly, and hung up. She looked out the window. Night had fallen. The house was quiet and cozy. Logs crackled in the fireplace, casting whimsical shadows on the walls. Olga felt a new, unfamiliar sensation, inner freedom, confidence, pride in herself and her family. She no longer felt deprived, unhappy, or abandoned. She was the master of her fate, her house, her inheritance. And she knew she could handle whatever lay ahead. For the first time in a long while, Olga smiled genuinely from the heart. She stood up, walked to the window, and gazed at the starry sky. It felt like, among the stars, she could see her grandmother Maria Stepanovna's smile. And that smile gave her strength to move forward. Olga returned to the fireplace, picked up an ancient book and opened it to the first page. She began to read. With every line, she sank deeper into the world of the past, her family's world, a world she was only now beginning to understand and cherish. She felt a growing curiosity for history, literature, and art. She realized her grandmother hadn't just left her a house and a library. She had left her a key to self-discovery, to finding herself. And Olga was ready to use that key. Olga would stay in Zarechi, restore the house, study the library, learn everything about her family, and she would be happy. It was her choice, and she was certain it was the right one, because it was made with her heart. Olga closed the book, turned off the light, and went to bed. She fell asleep quickly and deeply. In her dreams, her grandmother smiled and said, I always believed in you, Olenka. You can do anything. And Olga believed it. She truly could do anything, because now she had a purpose. And that purpose was more important than anything in the world. The next morning, Olga woke up feeling light and joyful. She stepped outside and breathed in the fresh village air. The sun shone brightly, birds sang cheerfully. The world around her felt renewed and beautiful. Olga smiled. She was happy, and this was just the beginning.